Hello everybody and welcome to the Women Talking Money podcast. My name is Gretchen from Magenta Financial Planning and today I'm joined by Sasha Wakefield. Sasha is the founder of the Paraplan Project, an outsourcing paraplan company. Sasha is a chartered financial planner and a fellow of the PFS, having worked in the financial services industry since she was 16 years old. Paraplanning is something she loves doing and in her own words is she's a financial planning geek. In 2022, Sasha set up the Paraplan Works, she also won Paraplanner of the Year from the Professional Advisor magazine in the same year. So welcome, Sasha, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Do you have anything else to add? Do you want to talk a little bit about how the Paraplan project's going now and what's going on with you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so it's been just over 2 years now that I set up the Paraplan Project, which seems crazy. Seems a lot longer. So I don't know how you feel when you set up your business, but I think you give absolutely everything to it. So yeah, it's definitely been a bit of a whirlwind. But yeah, over the last 2 years, it's gone from myself and then I have 3 lovely paraplanning ladies who also work alongside me. So yeah, we've had quite sort of a rapid expansion, I suppose. But yeah, I'm just loving every moment of it. You know, the ups and downs of being a business owner, but also yeah, just working with so many amazing financial planning firms. So yeah, it's definitely been an interesting 2 years for sure.
I mean, I often tell people I can't remember the first year of Magenta. So I just literally
just
can't
a blur.
remember about it. Just a blur of busyness. But yeah, and I mean, has there been anything that you've learned along the way that now you know stands you in a much better stead for kind of moving forward with these lovely people that you're working with?
Yeah, I think it's definitely not to be so hard on myself. I'm one of those people that I want to do everything perfect. I want it to all be done now. And it's actually trying to kind of take a step back sometimes and saying, well, actually, you're going to have to make maybe a few mistakes to actually get to where you want to get, to be able to learn and understand how, you know, to grow the company or to manage, you know, members of staff on my own. So yeah, it's kind of trying to embrace the learning that comes along with it. As a perfectionist, it's quite hard because I want everything to be perfect. So yeah, it's definitely trying to embrace that, you know, learning and also being supported by others. I didn't actually realise how much I needed to lean on other outsourced paraplanners, and vice versa, really. So it's great that we have this community that we're able to kind of have those open discussions about how our businesses are working and the things that go well and the things that, you know, maybe don't go so well. So yeah, definitely having those peers has been really helpful as well in understanding like my journey, I suppose.
I couldn't agree more. I think all of us know that community is really important. You could be quite isolating running a business, so it's good to have people around you.
Yes, definitely.
Hey, so today we're going to talk about money, and so that's the topic, that's the podcast. So to start off with, Sasha, why don't you just tell me a little bit about, you know, how you remember learning about money or what you heard when you were growing up, so we can understand like foundations of Sasha, really.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I actually thought about this really in a lot of depth the other day because I was trying to kind of work out where I got these kind of attitudes from, especially in my younger years. So I grew up with my mum and my stepdad, and we didn't have, you know, lots of money, and it wasn't something that was really spoken about. But we just, as children, we had that awareness. You know, when you go to school, certain things we had that were slightly different to other, you know, children perhaps. So we kind of just had that awareness. Maybe we didn't have as much money as some people. But, you know, my mum was a stay-at-home mum. There was 5 children to support. And my stepdad was a painter and decorator. So, you know, there was a lot of mouths to feed on one salary. And I think we definitely noticed as time went on that actually there was more conversations between them about money and my mum was a bit more of a spender. My stepdad was very much like a pride thing of wanting to support the family, very, I suppose, traditional values. And I think that naturally caused quite a lot of friction. And then on the other side of the coin was I met my dad, my biological dad, when I was 14. So he's actually someone who's very successful. He runs a business and he has a real different attitude, very much of he's not a spender. He literally will look at every single penny that comes into the account and he will not make any, like rash decisions and things like that. So I think as I went into my kind of teens, it was very much looking at two completely different households and different attitudes. And I think as I kind of then went into my later teens, there were kind of good and bad bits that I kind of must have picked up on from both of their attitudes that actually shaped quite a lot of probably more of the bad decisions that I made, because I was trying to kind of focus on, both families' sort of money styles, I suppose. It's when I started thinking about it, after you said about the question, it was very much like, oh yeah, I can see why I made that mistake because I've obviously been influenced by this or this. So yeah, it's crazy how much, even though we didn't speak about money, how much just the environment can shape your perception of what money means.
It's really interesting that you say that you almost can remember that the thing with your mum and stepdad, that being a source of friction, that their differing views about money maybe caused a little bit of friction. And fascinating, meet your biological dad at 14 and already you've got quite a lot of by then you do understand what money is, and you do understand, a lot of people have even had a little job or earned a little bit, or at least have had pocket money and things at that point. So to then meet him and him have a complete almost reverse, it's reverse psychology going on there, isn't it? A reverse mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what is quite odd is I have a lot of personality traits, especially when it comes to money, more like my dad, even though I didn't necessarily grow up with him. So it's very much kind of a blend of the attitudes and my environment that shaped that, but also almost like an element of my personality that makes me think a certain way about money or about work and the ethics of working. So it's a really weird mix that I've kind of somehow been shaped by, I think.
I think that you had that because he sounds like he's very much if we're thinking about money types, he's the kind of security. He's the security and planner guy who's I'm not going to spend until I know that I've kind of got all of that in my remit and I know what I've got. So, but I know that we see that really common in people, especially the planner thing, because of the profession that we are now in. Mm-hmm. So you'll see that echoed amongst people in our profession because we know that that's the sensible thing to do because that's what we've learned through all these exams that we've done. Can you reflect on 16, 18, before you even obviously you started in financial services at 16. So do you think some of that has shaped the way that you now look at money as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. When I first started working at 16, I sort of viewed money as very much a way of being able to buy these nice things that, all my friends had and things like that. And then as I kind of moved throughout my career and I've become more towards the financial planning section and my naturally sort of geeky analysis type self, it's definitely made me look at the numbers almost of how can I achieve this goal when looking at, what I need to do to be able to achieve that. So I definitely think working in the profession has given me that education that so many people don't have. When I look at, my friends and family, a lot of them have very different views of how I perhaps would manage my money and my finances now because I've had a different kind of experience and I suppose education around that. And that's something that I definitely want to educate my children on, in terms of like what money is and how you can earn money, and mortgages and loans, and what's good debt and what's bad debt and things like that. That, yeah, you just, I mean, I know it still happens now, but it's just not spoken about at school. And if families aren't open and transparent about their finances, I think it can, yeah, create quite sort of like a gap in that education and understanding of how to sort of handle money, I suppose.
And I couldn't agree more. Like, I think we've got to, we do have a massive advantage having worked in this for so many years and
Yeah,
understanding it, as you say, like you applying your kind of like geeky nature to your spreadsheets of and that kind of thing of understanding it and the maths behind it. And
yeah,
like for me, just like that kind of discussions with clients and understanding what people really have never been taught. Like, it's mad how the financial almost like intelligence or literacy is just so low and we need to try and break down that barrier, that because it's just causing major barriers for people.
yeah, absolutely. And I think we're in such a almost a weird time in how people view kind of money, and very much, with social media as well. A lot of my younger brothers and sisters will look at things and they'll be like, oh, well, this person's bought this, so they must be rich, or, they're going on all these holidays, they must be doing well for themselves. And actually, that perception might not be reality. Whereas back in the day, you couldn't, take out loans and, all these type of finance kind of products without, a lot more kind of background checks and things like that. It just wasn't as readily available, that kind of debt. So I think there is almost needs to be a lot more education around, that element as well, and how to really stop the younger generation trying to live a lifestyle that perhaps is beyond their means. I mean, I could talk about that for hours, but yeah, with my younger brothers and sisters, I definitely notice sort of that difference in perception. Whereas I'll look on Instagram and, I'll just be scrolling on stuff, but I don't feel like I have that same attitude of, oh, they must be doing all right. Oh, I wish I had, this bag or this. But yeah, it's definitely that
I
different.
think, yeah. And that keeping up with the Joneses thing has always been there. But I
Yeah.
think that it is, let's think about it. When I was growing up, it was just like where we went on. No one knew where we went on holiday unless they
No.
actually spoke to us.
Yeah. Where you went to Boots and
You
printed out
couldn't
the
come.
photos.
Yeah, you couldn't compare in the same way, that kind of comparison lifestyle that we're in now because of social media. And I think also, I don't know if you feel this, like I'm really interested to know if it's like with your friends and family as well, is that more and more people are kind of saying to me, even and on this podcast, that living for today is the thing that they're prioritizing. And I think
Yeah.
that some of that has come out of like the pandemic now, and I think that having a balance is really important, but I actually find it really scary, like how much is going towards that. Like I'm investing in experiences, which I totally get.
Yeah. Yeah.
But versus like that, have you got it in a good balance with that long term kind of view of the fact that you might also live till you're in your 90s,
Yeah,
that kind of
exactly.
thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you see that in your friendship groups? Like, do you see that is kind of like definitely a kind of a challenge that we've got now?
A little bit in my friendship group. I mean, actually, as far as friends go, they're quite sensible with money, or the perception that I have of them is very sensible. They've all bought their own homes, and they've all got very secure jobs. But definitely in terms of my younger brothers and sisters, so they're sort of between 19 and 24, they're with themselves and their friendship groups, definitely a difference in attitudes, and like you said, very much let's live for today, which I think from my friendship group is definitely a blend of let's live for today, but also I need to pay my mortgage and I want to do this and I want to be able to think about the future. So that's definitely my attitude. It's just trying to get that balance, I suppose, right, isn't it?
So talk to me a little bit. You've referred a couple of times to your geekiness, so I imagine I might know the answer to some of what's coming up. But do you and your partner have like a budgeting system that you use? You know, do you have your do you keep things separate? Do you do joint things? Like, what's kind of the dynamic there?
Yeah, so actually, over the last year, we've moved our finances all together. So we've been together for 13 years now. And up until that point, more for me, and I don't know if this again is like an independence thing, but I was very much, we have our joint account and we pay a certain amount in every month and that covers our bills. And then what's your money is your money and my money is my money. And Aaron's always been very much, he's grown up with a household where everything, his mum and dad, regardless of who earned what, was put into that one pot, and it was seen as kind of, that's what they live off, and had those shared goals. And yeah, it was sort of over the last year that I was like, why am I being so stubborn? Why are we not working together? And actually, since we have kind of been a lot more open about finances, I mean, we always have been open, like we knew what we each other earn, but having everything together is actually helped us align and harmonise more of our sort of own financial goals. So, with what we're going to do when our baby comes, how we're going to finance that, because our situation's a little bit more quirky than other people. What do we want to do in the house, and how will we finance holidays and things like that. So actually, that is probably the best thing we have ever done, because it feels like we're actually in a more comfortable position than we were when our finances were separate, seems strange because there's no change, but maybe it's just a kind of mental change.
That's really interesting.
Happened. Yeah. But for someone who loves spreadsheets, I mean, I do have a budgeting system, but it's not actually as in-depth as people would probably think. So it's very straightforward. It's very much, once or twice a year, I'll go on to our bank, we'll download our transaction history, and it kind of splits it automatically into different categories. And I think sometimes it actually does shock you how much you spend on just absolute random rubbish. And yeah, you're just looking at your food bills and, how many times did I go to Costa last month? And it's just kind of having a look at, actually, is there anything that we can reduce? Sometimes it's just you set up, direct debits for however many different TV subscriptions that we don't need and we forget about. So it's just kind of almost a sense check of, do we need to have like 5 different TV apps? No, absolutely not. So we'll go in and then, cancel them or look at different insurances. So we'll kind of, do a bit of a spot check twice a year together. And we do actually sit down and look at the spreadsheet, and very much led by me with, my formulas and bits and pieces, and Aaron's very much like the observer. But yeah, I think it's quite good that we both have that awareness of what we're spending. And if, there are set goals that we want to achieve, then we'll start putting together like little sub pots and have like automatic standing orders to be like, right, okay, if we want to buy, I don't know, a new piece of furniture that we really like, we'll save up £150 a month, and we'll just do that automatically into those sub pots. And then once that goal's achieved, we'll almost break the pot. And then go and buy it. So we'll kind of work together with those types of like goals, I suppose.
It's really interesting that, you've, after all these years, combined, and actually suddenly, as you say, nothing's changed, but maybe it's just that better. There's like there's a broader overview about your financials from doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I know everyone's different. It doesn't work for everyone, but I think actually having that transparency and openness about what we have, and working together, has really benefited us. So yeah, I definitely think that's how we'll just keep things sort of moving forward and working together really, and being able to talk about money, which I see so much, as you probably do, when and writing reports, and you can see the dynamics between a couple, for example. We see it all the time where perhaps it's the male who only wants to attend the meeting, and the female doesn't have an awareness of the finances, or is not as naturally wanting to be involved in the finances, and that's very traditional. But then we're seeing actually a lot more couples, regardless of gender, actually wanting to talk about their finances and their goals and things like that. So I'm wondering if maybe there is potentially more of a shift over time where we will see that, those conversations and transparency and openness between couples become more at the forefront of those types of planning meetings, as opposed to just managing finances separate. I'm not sure.
So, and I think so. I mean, I think there'll be more and more. And what I find really interesting is that, this has been really positive experience for you two, but your reflection on it is that, but we'll continue to manage it together and talk about it regularly and be more open about the money, because we now know what one another, the complete situation. And I think that there's that hanging on to, like, I'm all for like being independent, but there's the kind of hanging on by the as you say, being stubborn and not being willing to be kind of like accepting to the fact that we can combine it, but I can still also know what's going on, and I can still also, have my money, and you can still have your money, but it just in a slightly different way. And I think that's a really important message, actually. We want to know we can be independent. We want to know that we can, if something happened, we would know what to do.
Yes.
Combining doesn't mean that you have to forget all about those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what about, there's something you said earlier, which was about, I think you'd really reflected on money as you grew up and how your thoughts had changed. And you said a couple of things that you said, the mistakes I made, I can absolutely kind of like see that, that might have been because of something I'd grown up with. So have you ever made, let's think about a financial decision that you regret, and how did you handle it?
So I suppose it is good in one way because I was being more overly cautious. But when myself and my partner were looking to buy our first home together, we were quite concerned about having a big mortgage and how would we afford, our lifestyle. Even just how would we afford to get to work? Because at that time we were both working in London. The train prices were just astronomical. So the actual cost of us getting to work was more than our mortgage in the end, which was crazy. So my partner's a lot more cautious than me about spending money. So perhaps maybe I got more influenced by him. But when we were looking at buying our house, we ended up buying a property that we knew we were going to outgrow. And we bought this property, and I feel like in hindsight, maybe we should have stretched ourselves to take out a little bit more of a higher mortgage, because the interest rates were low. We could have afforded it, but I think, it was just at the time we were just being very cautious, and perhaps we could have been in a different position where, if we bought a slightly bigger house, we wouldn't have necessarily moved the second time. But I suppose it's a good thing because we didn't get ourselves, in a muddle. But it's trying to kind of, I suppose, make those decisions with more of like a balanced perspective, weighing up what are the risks of doing this, but what are also the opportunities that we could have. So I would say that's probably kind of just something that we've looked back on. So then when we moved this time, it was very much, let's stretch ourselves that bit further, but obviously not too much. So just taking on perhaps a little bit more, so that we know that in the future we were less likely, or hopefully not looking to move, and we're settled. And in hindsight, it was quite good timing because we literally got a mortgage about 6 months before all the interest rate hikes. So hindsight for that was actually was pretty good. But
Yeah. And I love that, you can reflect on it and go, actually, we probably should have taken a bit more risk. And, because it's a massive decision buying a first house. And of course, you're going to
yeah,
be worried about the debt and all of that. But I think, um, I guess that is always so important to kind of think about, it's that balanced view. And if if he's very cautious and you tend to lean on a cautious side, then having that kind of conversation and going, hang on, are we restricting ourselves? Like, well, are we, is this the right decision? But an awareness of it is a massive thing.
yeah, definitely. And it's like anything, it's just trying to really have that balance, isn't it, between the risks and the opportunities, and that's so hard sometimes to gauge, especially when it's your own financial situation. Like, we're so easy to be able to, as financial planners and financial paraplanners, to stick everything in a cash flow and be able to analyze it and go, yeah, that is affordable. But it's like, why didn't I do that for myself? And I think it is that, almost because it is your situation. Perhaps you look at it slightly differently and you're like, oh, actually, no, we should buy a smaller house than we can afford, rather than actually buy the house that we probably should have purchased originally.
You're too connected to it and too
Yeah,
emotionally connected to those
yeah,
feelings, which big
yeah.
challenge, absolutely. So do you think that your approach to money has changed as you're getting older? Because you're not old, but as you're getting older.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And like we touched on earlier, I definitely think that the profession has played a massive part in sort of like the education that I have, and my perspective and approach to money now. I would say I've got a lot healthier relationship with money. I think when I was younger, it was very much I wanted to earn money to be able to buy certain things, and because I thought maybe that was more fulfilling. But actually, for me now, being able to earn money, and be able to kind of live a lifestyle that I want to lead, which doesn't necessarily mean buying those material things. It could be experiences, it could be saving for the future, all of these different things. So yeah, it's definitely taught me, as well as I've actually ended up earning more. I actually save a lot more, which obviously makes sense, but I actually haven't spent, I don't spend more than what I used to. I've still kind of had that same lifestyle, but instead I'm just making more of a opportunity to save for the future. So whereas I think a lot of people, when you earn more, you spend more. So I've tried to kind of keep up with that healthy relationship, to be like, I don't actually need to spend more, as much as I probably want to go out and buy a new fancy bag or something like that. It's very much keeping that same lifestyle, but being able to think about the future and save for the future.
And I mean, people watching the video won't be able to see that you're very pregnant and going to give birth in 3 weeks' time. But tell me, going a little bit off piste from the questions because it's relevant. How have you and Aaron had to think about, this new life and how you're going to create, be able to afford it, and thinking about all the costs that come alongside having children?
Yeah, we're definitely going a different approach than probably most households. So with me running a business, Aaron being employed, we really had to sort of sit down and work out how we're actually going to do this, not just financially, but also because running a business that does add an extra level of complexity. So I think until I got pregnant, I didn't really have much understanding of sort of like SMP, statutory maternity pay. I knew it was not that great, but actually when I started looking into it, and what entitlements you have, both as a mother but also a father or a partner, in terms of paternity pay, it's actually crazy to think that SMP is less than half of the national minimum wage, which for starters, is already putting so many individuals on a financial back burner by making that life choice. So what myself and Aaron have done is I'm going to be taking sort of the first 6 to 8 weeks off, which will be S&P because I have my own business, but I am employed. And thereafter, we've actually worked with Aaron's company so that he's going to be taking shared parental leave for the remaining 8 months or 9 months. We've had quite a few comments about that, which both positive and slightly sort of negative in terms of how we're approaching our situation. But I think very much when you're thinking about having a family, you do need to have these discussions, and sometimes you have to do what's actually best for your family as opposed to what society thinks you should do, perhaps. So yeah, it's definitely brought me and Aaron closer in terms of having those conversations, and now we do have our money together. It's been great to have that openness to be like, actually, it doesn't matter whether I'm off or you're off. It's just how we're going to be able to meet our needs for that first year, where I can balance work, but also having, that amazing time with our new baby as well.
Amazing. And I think just having more and more open conversations about that is the answer, rather than assuming that we would have to call a traditional solution to this, And it's really interesting to reflect on it. The women that I know who are running businesses, and majority of them anyway, especially those that were very, pretty high focused and high earning at that point, did only take off probably 8 weeks or 3 months and balanced everything else. It's a really interesting one, and had the support of other people, obviously, and their partners,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm quite lucky in the fact that Aaron, he doesn't, he wants to do this to support me. Like, in an ideal world, I think he'd be quite happy to still go back to work. But we're very much supporting each other because we know actually long term it is beneficial to do what we're doing. But one thing I would definitely say to people that are considering something a little bit more quirky in terms of taking up shared parental leave, which is really Aaron's the first case at his work for taking shared parental. So they had the most basic policy, but actually Aaron had an open conversation with his employer and was able to advocate for us, and they ended up actually improving or enhancing the policy that they had for shared parental, because there was actually someone that was going to take it up. So I think for individuals that are employed, it's definitely beneficial having those conversations with your employer to see, actually, is there anything that you can do to negotiate, or when did they last review the policy, just to be able to work out what's actually best for you, and so that you feel empowered in the support from your employer and vice versa.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing a bit about that, because I think it will be really helpful. It's not a conversation that I've had with anyone, so I think it's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And so let's just skip forward because we're running out of time. So what about, have you ever received a piece of financial advice from someone that you think that, you still hold in good stead and carry forward with you?
I was trying to think about this one, and I was like, well, I think I have, but it's almost a little bit of a memory as well. It's just a really random one. So it kind of comes back to savings and having all these little sub pots that me and Aaron have. But growing up, my grandma and my great auntie used to have those little coin bags, and we had them when I worked in the bank. And it was, on the front it would be 50. If you saved, 20, 50p's, you could then go to the bank and deposit it. Well, my grandma and auntie were obsessed with these coin bags. So at the end of every week, they would empty their purse and they would then be like, right, the 2p's go in here, the 50p, and they would empty completely their purse and put them in these little bags. And I still remember when £2 coins were launched, and they were so special that I think my gran was literally raiding everyone who had a £2 coin so that she could collect them and save them in these bags. But it's not really financial advice that I've received, but it was kind of watching them do that and be able to kind of get excited when they got to that goal of something that they've achieved, which is, I don't know, £20 of pound coins, and going to the bank and being able to put it into their savings to buy something. That's kind of now come back to me in terms of the little electronic versions of the little saving pots that we have here, in terms of, okay, well, you can set up ones where it rounds up like purchases and things like that. So it's almost that kind of form of saving without realizing it. And I think that's what my gran and my great auntie used to do. But yeah, I was thinking back and just laughing to myself at how crazy my gran got with these £2 coins, and yeah, just trying to save like all these extra little bits. So yeah, I would say that's probably kind of a memory of money, but also kind of something that shaped, I suppose, my little savings pots.
Well, it gets I can see, the auto rounding thing, when you go and spend and then it auto rounds it up, or it auto rounds it to your different pot. I think that probably gives the same amount of excitement, in the sense that then when you review it and you're like, wow, I've got that much in my pot, it's not quite the same as the excitement over £2, but I get it. I think it's a similar vibe.
Yeah, and I think it feels almost like you aren't saving when you set up anything like that. That's whether it's rounding up or standing orders and things like that goes straight into a savings account. I think when I used to sit there and do it manually, it felt more depressing, because like, you'd feel like, I've got to sit there and put that £100 away, but I would rather spend it. Whereas if it happens automatically, you don't actually notice, and it just goes away in these little sub pots, and it's a nice surprise, I suppose.
I like that. So I'm going to skip forward to the last question then, because we'll round up. So what does financial freedom mean to you, Sasha?
For me, and it's so hard because I think in our profession we hear it all the time, but I think for me it's just being able to live the life that I want, but in a way not being able to afford everything I want, which I know sounds really weird, but I think for me it's being able to have enough wealth to eliminate the big worries that you have, retirement, having children, but also balancing that empowerment that comes from consciously saving towards goals that you have. So whether it's like a big holiday that you want, or a new car, or helping your children when they want to go to university. So yeah, I think it sounds a bit mad, because you'd think that the answer would be like, well, I want all of the money in the world so I can do everything that I want to do and live this amazing life. But actually, what fulfillment do you get if you can afford everything? So I think having that empowerment is something that kind of goes with financial freedom as well, if that makes sense.
So the concept is then that, those things that create worry, the debt, the mortgage, can you afford, your food, and all of those kinds of things, those things that make your life difficult, harder, like the peace of mind things, would be covered.
Yes.
And then, but the concept that that you'd still have that kind of like benefit of going, but actually I've really saved for this and I feel really good about this, and I can go and enjoy that thing, be it a holiday or that kind of thing. It's like finding that balance for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Having that, I suppose, control and empowerment towards those bigger goals that you might have, but yeah, like you said, at the same time being able to still live my desired lifestyle would be great.
With purpose, yeah. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah, with
I love
purpose,
that.
yeah.
Thank you so much, Sasha. It's been really good to talk to you, and there's been some stuff that's come up that's not come up with anyone else, so I really, really appreciate it.
Oh no, thank you so much for having me. It's been brilliant.